The Vili commander stood at the entrance to the main concourse. Her soldiers arrayed behind her in perfect formation. Before her stretched a wall of beings she had never expected to face. These were not warriors. They were merchants and maintenance workers. Scientists and empaths, ordinary beings who had chosen an extraordinary moment to take a stand. "I am Commander Vexrus of the Vili Security Forces," she announced, her voice echoing through the silent chamber. "I am here under legal authority of the Coalition Council to remove dangerous predator offspring from this civilian installation." Administrator Vexel pushed through the crowd and stood at the front of the barrier. For 3 days, he had watched, calculated, and considered every angle of this crisis. Now it was time to act. "Commander, I am the administrator of this station, and I refuse your request." "This is not a request," Vexrus replied coldly. "It is an order backed by military force. Then you will have to use that force against us," Vexel said, gesturing to the beings behind him. "Against all of us," Vexrus surveyed the crowd with growing unease. She had expected resistance from the humans. Perhaps a handful of foolish sympathizers. She had not expected hundreds of beings from dozens of species, standing together in defiance of everything the galaxy believed about predators and prey. "You are protecting dangerous creatures," she argued. "Human young are among the most unpredictable and savage life forms in known space, and our own reports confirm this." "Your reports are wrong." The voice came from Quillix, who pushed forward with her data tablet raised. "I've spent 3 days observing these children," the Morath researcher declared. "I have documented cooperative behavior, empathic responses, and social bonding patterns that directly contradict every model of predator development in our literature. One researcher's opinion does not override decades of established science." Vexrus dismissed. "Then look with your own eyes," Quillix challenged. "Tell me what you see." Vexrus looked past the barrier to where the children sat huddled together. Baby Sumin had woken and was reaching toward presents with tiny hands. Fascinated by the hollow's shimmering form, the twins Minjun and Minseo were playing a quiet game with pebbles. Keeping score on their fingers, Hannah was drawing again, her pencils moving steadily across paper as she captured the scene around her, and at the front stood Ji-hoon, a boy who should have been in school learning mathematics and literature, instead standing guard over the only family he had left. "I see predator cubs," Vexrus said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I see children," Presence countered, moving forward until they stood directly before the commander. "I am hollow, and I experience emotions as physical reality. And I can tell you exactly what these young ones feel." The hollow's form pulsed with colors that shifted through the emotional spectrum. They feel grief for parents they have lost, terror of a universe that has shown them only cruelty, exhaustion from weeks of running and hiding. But underneath all of that, hope. Hope for what? Hope that someone somewhere will see them as they truly are and not as monsters to be feared. Vexrus felt something shift in her chest, an uncomfortable sensation she did not recognize. "My orders are clear," she said. But her hand moved away from her weapon. "Orders can be questioned," Security Chief Torval announced, stepping forward to stand beside Vexel. "I have served in security forces for 20 years, and I have learned that the best officers know when orders are wrong. You would have me defy the Coalition Council?" "I would have you look at those children," Torval replied, pointing at the small figures behind the barrier. "Really look at them, and tell me they are a threat that justifies military action." Commander Vexrus looked. She saw Ji-hoon watching her with eyes that held no hatred, only weary determination. She saw Hannah glance up from her drawing to study the Vili soldiers with artistic curiosity. She saw Minjun wave at one of her troops, the same innocent gesture he had offered to the Gren worker days ago. These were not the savage predator cubs described in the reports. These were children, frightened and alone, surrounded by strangers who had chosen compassion over fear. Commander, her tactical officer said through her earpiece. We are receiving communications from the flagship, and the broadcast of this standoff has gone viral across galactic networks. Vexrus closed her eyes. Billions of beings were watching this moment. If she used force against this coalition of species protecting human children, she would prove that the Vili were the true aggressors. But if she backed down, everything the galaxy believed about humans would be called into question. Commander Vexrus, Jaehoon spoke suddenly, his young voice carrying through the chamber. May I say something? Vexrus looked at the boy in surprise. You may. Jaehoon stepped forward. Past the barrier, past Vexil and Torval and Presence, until he stood alone between the protectors and the soldiers. 3 weeks ago, my world was destroyed, he said. I watched my parents die, and I held my neighbors as they took their last breaths. And I gathered every child I could find and brought them to Captain Park's ship because I did not know what else to do. His voice trembled, but did not break. We have been running ever since, looking for somewhere safe, somewhere that people would not look at us with fear. And I do not understand why you are all so afraid of us. He spread his hands, showing that they were empty. We are just children, and we just want to live. The silence that followed was absolute. Vexrus stared at the boy before her. This small predator who had crossed the galaxy, protecting those weaker than himself. And she felt something crack in her certainty. Stand down, she ordered quietly. Her tactical officer started in surprise. Commander? Stand down, Vexrus repeated, louder this time. All units return to shuttles, and we are withdrawing. The soldiers looked at each other in confusion. But training took over, and they began to retreat. Vexrus took one last look at Jaehoon, then turned and walked away outside the station. The coalition fleet received the withdrawal order and slowly began to disperse on world after world. Beings who had been watching the BROADCAs to struggle to process what they had seen. Species who should have fled from predators had instead protected their young children who should have been savage and dangerous, had shown nothing but grief and hope. Everything they thought they knew had been called into question. In the main concourse of Nexus Station Theta 7, the barrier of beings slowly dissolved. As the danger passed, the children emerged from behind their protectors. Uncertain and overwhelmed, Hana ran to Quillix and threw her arms around the surprised researcher. Thank you for staying, the girl whispered. Quillix carefully returned the embrace, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly. Thank you for the flowers, she replied, remembering the girl's request about gardens. Over the following hours, the station slowly returned to something like normal. The Gren workers unsealed the maintenance junctions they had. Lockdown Security Chief Torval dismissed his teams with quiet words of praise. Administrator Vexil began the long process of filing reports that would rewrite diplomatic relations across the sector, and the children of New Bizon finally got to rest in proper quarters, with real beds and warm food and beings who smiled at them instead of running away. 3 days later, the gentle current completed its repairs. Captain Park prepared for departure, her manifest now including authorization to transport the children to a human colony that had agreed to provide them permanent homes. But saying goodbye proved harder than anyone expected. The entire remaining population of Nexus Station Theta 7 gathered in Levi docking bay to see them off. Presence held baby Su Min one last time, humming the soothing frequency the infant had come to love. Old Catch gave Min Jun a small toolkit, telling the boy that everyone needed to know how to fix things. Quillix received a pressed flower from Hana, carefully preserved from the station's botanical gardens. For your research, Hana said shyly. Quillix clutched the flower like a treasure. I will keep it always. Jaehoon approached Administrator Vexil and bowed formally in the human tradition of respect. Thank you for your courage, the boy said. Vexel regarded the young human who had faced down an invasion force with nothing but words. "Thank you for teaching us that courage is not the absence of fear," he replied, "but the choice to protect the vulnerable anyway." The gentle current departed as the entire station watched. Its engines flared against the darkness, carrying 17 children toward a new home and a new future, and across the galaxy. Beings began asking a dangerous question that would reshape civilizations for generations to come. What else had they been wrong about? In the end, half the station had fled from predator cubs, but the other half had stayed, and in staying, they had discovered that the most dangerous thing in the universe was not the monsters we imagine. It was the fear that kept us from seeing each other. Clearly, the children of New Bazang would grow up telling stories of the station where strangers became family, and those strangers would spend the rest of their lives telling stories of the children who taught them how to be brave. 12 warships hung in the darkness around Nexus Station Theta 7, their weapons tracking and their shields raised. The Coalition fleet represented some of the most powerful species in the sector, beings who had fled in terror 3 days ago and returned with guns. Commander Vexrus of the Vili Security Forces stood on the bridge of the lead vessel and broadcast her ultimatum on all frequencies. "Attention, Nexus Station Theta 7. Her voice crackled through every speaker on the station. You are harboring dangerous predator offspring in violation of Galactic Safety Protocol 17, and you will surrender them immediately for transport to a secure containment facility." Administrator Vexel listened to the broadcast from his office, his 4 eyes fixed on the fleet outside his window. "And if we refuse?" he asked through the communication channel. "Then we will board the station and take them by force," Vexrus replied. "We have authorization from the Coalition Council and the legal right to protect civilized space from predator threats." In the main concourse, the children huddled together as the broadcast echoed around them. The beings who had been cautiously approaching them just hours ago now looked at the view screens with fear in their eyes. "What is happening?" little Su Yan asked. Clutching Ji-hoon's arm, Ji-hoon watched the warships on the screen and felt his heart grow cold. "They want to take us away," he said quietly. "Where?" "I do not know." Captain Yuna Park pushed through the crowd to reach the children, her face grim. "We need to get you back to the ship," she said. "If we leave now, maybe they will follow us and leave the station alone." Ji-hoon shook his head. "Your ship is still damaged, and we would not make it far before they caught us." "Then what do we do?" Before Ji-hoon could answer, presence moved to stand beside them, their translucent form glowing with determination. "You do nothing," the Hollow said. "We will handle this." "We?" Captain Park, as presence, gestured to the beings around them. The Gren maintenance workers had put down their tools and formed a loose circle around the children. Quillick stood nearby with her data tablet, her scientific detachment replaced by protective anger. More beings were emerging from the crowd, species who had spent the past few hours watching the children laugh and play and cry and dream. "They came to take predator cubs," said Old Ketch the Gren, his voice rough but steady. "But I do not see any predators here. Just frightened children who need help." The Hollow Collective issued a statement to broadcast across the station. "We will place ourselves between any boarding party and these children," Presence announced. "Their pain is our pain and their fear is our fear, and we will not abandon them to those who cannot see past their own terror." In her office, Quillix transmitted her preliminary research findings to every scientific institution she could reach. "Current models of human development are fundamentally flawed," her report declared. "Observation of human young in natural settings reveals cooperative behavior, empathic responses, and social bonding patterns consistent with community-oriented species rather than solitary predators." The report spread quickly. sparking debates in academic circles across the galaxy. On the bridge of the Coalition flagship, Commander Vectress received the transmission and deleted it without reading propaganda. She dismissed. The humans are manipulating weaker species, and this is exactly why we must remove the threat before it spreads. She turned to her tactical officer. Prepare boarding parties, and we will enter the station in 1 hour. Security Chief Torval gathered his small team in the main security office. I will not lie to you, he said. We are outnumbered and outgunned, and if the Coalition forces decide to push through, we cannot stop them. Then why are we still here? Asked one of his younger officers. Torval looked out at the concourse, where beings from a dozen species had formed a protective ring around 17 human children. Because sometimes doing the right thing matters more than winning, he answered. We will position ourselves at key checkpoints, not to fight, but to document. And everything that happens will be recorded and broadcast to the galaxy. You think that will stop them? No, Torval admitted, but it will make them think twice. In the station's maintenance sections, the Gren workers were making preparations of their own main power Junction 12, Ketch muttered. Sealing the access panel, life support node 7, and the primary navigation relay. What are you doing? Brix asked nervously, making sure that if they want to control this station, they will have to ask us nicely. He looked at his apprentice with old, tired eyes. A station is nothing but metal on wires, but the people who keep it running, we are what makes it alive, and without us, those Coalition soldiers will be stumbling around in the dark. The hour passed slowly in the main concourse. The children sat surrounded by their unlikely protectors. Hana drew pictures to calm her nerves. Sketching the faces of the aliens who had chosen to stand with them, Minjun played a clapping game with a young Gren who had never seen the like. Baby Sumin slept peacefully in the arms of presence. Unaware of the danger closing in, Ji-hoon stood at the front of the group, watching the main entrance. He was 12 years old. He had seen his home destroyed and his parents killed. He had crossed the galaxy in a damaged freighter, caring for children even younger than himself, and now he would stand between them and whatever came through those doors. You do not have to do this, Captain Park said quietly, coming to stand beside him. Yes, I do, Ji-hoon replied. These are my family now, and this is what family does. The airlock alarms began to sound on view screens throughout the station. Everyone watched as Coalition shuttles docked at the main entry points. Vili security forces in full combat armor emerged from the vessels, their weapons drawn and their expressions hidden behind dark visors. All residents are ordered to disperse, the lead officer announced through external speakers. Stand aside and surrender the human offspring. Nobody moved. The Vili forces advanced through the corridors, their boots echoing on metal floors. They passed empty shops and darkened quarters, moving steadily toward the main concourse. When they reached the entrance, they stopped. Before them stood a wall of beings, hollow, who glowed with fierce determination. Gren, who held their tools like weapons, Morath researchers who clutched data tablets like shields, and dozens of other species who had decided that today, fear would not win. At the center of this living barrier sat 17 human children, their faces pale, but their eyes steady, and at the very front stood Ji-hoon, a 12-year-old boy who had nothing left to lose. These children are under our protection, Presence announced. If you want them, you will have to go through all of us. The Vili commander looked at the barrier, then at her soldiers, then at the cameras she knew were broadcasting everything to the galaxy. Stand aside, she ordered, her voice uncertain for the first time. No, said 19,000 voices as one. The standoff had begun. Captain Unipark stood in the cargo hold of the Gentle Current and faced an impossible decision. For 2 days, the children had remained hidden in this converted space, eating ration meals and sleeping on makeshift beds while the station's remaining population watched from a distance. But hiding was not working. Fear grew in darkness. And the only way to fight it was with light. "We are going outside," Yuna announced to her crew. All of us, including the children. Dae-Young stared at her as if she had lost her mind. "Captain, the station residents are terrified of us, and bringing the children into the open could cause a panic." "They are already panicking," Yuna replied. "They are panicking because they do not know what we are, and they are imagining monsters because they have never seen the truth." She turned to Ji-hoon, who had been listening quietly. "What do you think?" she asked. "You are the oldest among the children, and your opinion matters." Ji-hoon considered the question carefully. He remembered the terrified face of the forest inspector and the way entire species had fled at the mere mention of human young. But he also remembered something his father had told him before the pirates came. "Fear is a wall," Ji-hoon said slowly. "And walls only fall when someone is brave enough to walk through them." Yuna smiled despite everything. "Your father was a wise man." The news that the humans were leaving their ship spread through Nexus Station Theta 7 within minutes. Beings rushed to secure locations, sealing doors, and activating barriers, while others gathered at safe distances to watch the spectacle unfold. Security Chief Torval positioned his small team at key points throughout the main concourse, not to attack, but to maintain order. "Nobody touches the children," he ordered. "Nobody threatens them, and nobody harasses them. But we do not restrict the other residents either." "What if someone panics?" asked one of his officers. Torval checked his weapon, then holstered it firmly. "Then we remind them that courage is contagious." The cargo bay doors opened with a soft hiss. Captain Park emerged first, her posture straight and her hands visible at her sides. Behind her came the children, arranged by age, with the oldest at the front and the youngest carried by the crew members. Ji-hoon walked just behind the captain, his face calm despite his racing heart. He held the hand of 6-year-old Min-jun, who gripped back so tightly it hurt. "It is okay," Ji-hoon whispered. "Just walk and do not be afraid." "I am afraid," Min-jun admitted. "So am I," Ji-hoon replied. "But we can be afraid and brave at the same time." The procession moved slowly through the docking bay and into the main concourse of the station. 19,000 beings watched from behind barriers, through security screens, from sealed doorways and elevated walkways. The silence was so complete that every footstep echoed like thunder. Hana looked around at the strange beings watching them and felt her chest tighten with anxiety. There were creatures with fur and creatures with scales, beings made of light and beings made of shadow, species she had only seen in educational videos, and species she could not have imagined in her wildest dreams. "They are all looking at us," she whispered to Ji-hoon. "Yes. Are they going to hurt us?" Ji-hoon squeezed her hand. "I will not let them." The group reached the center of the main concourse, a wide-open space surrounded by shops and restaurants that now stood empty and dark. Captain Park stopped and turned to address the watching crowd. But before she could speak, something unexpected happened. Baby Sumin, held in the arms of crew member Han Sol, began to cry. The sound was not loud, just the soft wailing of an infant who was tired and hungry and confused. But in the terrible silence of the concourse, it carried to every ear. The watching beings shifted uncomfortably. Some pressed closer to their barriers, some stepped back, and some simply froze, unsure how to react. Then a figure moved through the crowd. Presence, the hollow council member, emerged from behind a security barrier and walked toward the crying infant. The hollow were empathic beings who experienced emotions as physical sensations, and the grief and fear radiating from these children had been causing Presence actual pain for 2 days. They could not bear it any longer. "May I?" Presence asked, their translucent form shimmering with colors of concern. Han Sol looked at Captain Park. who nodded slowly. Presence moved closer to the crying baby and began to hum. It was not a melody that humans would recognize, but rather a frequency designed to soothe distressed minds across species barriers. The sound resonated through the concourse, and slowly, gradually, Baby Sumin's crying softened to hiccups and then to peaceful silence. "Thank you." Hansol whispered. Presence tilted their head in acknowledgement. "Her pain was my pain," they explained simply. I could not stand by. The watching crowd stirred with confusion. This was not what they had expected. Predator young were supposed to be savage and uncontrollable. But this infant had responded to kindness just like any other child. Young Min Jun spotted a Gren maintenance worker standing near the edge of the crowd and waved. The Gren, startled by the attention, hesitated for a long moment. Then, slowly, uncertainly, he waved back. Min Chan's face split into a huge smile. "He waved at me," the boy said excitedly, tugging on Ji-hoon's hand. "Did you see? He waved at me." Hannah approached Quillix, the Morath researcher who had been watching from behind a pillar, and looked up at her with curious eyes. "Excuse me," Hannah said politely. "Does this station have any gardens? I miss flowers very much, and I have not seen any green things since we left New Bizen." Quillix blinked all four of her eyes in surprise. "Yes," she stammered. "There is a botanical section on level 12. Really?" Hannah's face lit up with joy. "Could I visit it sometime? I promise I would be very careful with the plants." Quillix found herself smiling despite her scientific detachment. "I think that could be arranged." She began taking notes furiously on her data tablet, documenting behaviors that contradicted everything the galactic community believed about predator species offspring cooperative. She wrote, "Polite, curious about environment, seeks connection with other species, displays none of the aggressive tendencies predicted by current models." But not everyone was comforted by what they saw in a communication center on the far side of the station. A Felrith merchant named Drex was recording video of the scene and transmitting it to contacts across the galaxy. "This is footage from Nexus Station Theta 7, he narrated. "As you can see, the human predators are using their young to infiltrate civilian populations, and this is clearly an invasion tactic, designed to lower our defenses before the adult hunters move in." He zoomed in on the children's faces, focusing on their eyes. "Notice the forward-facing vision," he continued. "Classic predator adaptation for tracking prey. And these cubs are learning to identify targets even now." The broadcast spread quickly through networks that were already primed for fear. Within hours, millions of beings across dozens of worlds had seen the footage, and most accepted Drex's interpretation without question. But on Nexus Station Theta 7, something different was happening. More beings were emerging from their hiding places, drawn by curiosity to see the human children up close. The children responded with the openness of youth, asking questions about unfamiliar species, sharing stories about their lost home, and demonstrating again and again that they meant no harm. As the station entered its evening cycle, Security Chief Torval received an urgent communication. "Chief," his officer reported, "we have detected a fleet of ships approaching the station." "How many?" 12 vessels, sir, and they are broadcasting Coalition Authority codes." Torval's stomach dropped. "Who sent them?" "The species that fled, sir, and they are demanding the surrender of the human children." Outside the viewport, the first ships dropped out of faster than light travel, their weapon systems already powered and ready. The brief moment of hope was over. The siege was about to begin. The departure bays of Nexus Station Theta 7 had never seen such chaos in all their years of operation. Ships launched without proper clearance and navigation. Lights blinked frantically as vessels crowded together in their desperate rush to escape. A Felrith cargo hauler clipped a Vili transport, sending both spinning into a Skrull passenger liner. and the collision created a chain reaction that damaged 7 more ships before emergency crews could respond. Inside the station, the exodus continued with equal desperation. The Felrith Trade Consortium abandoned warehouses filled with merchandise they had spent years accumulating, and their golden-furred merchants ran through corridors without looking back. Leaving doors open and lights burning predator cubs, they whispered to each other. The humans have brought their young to hunt. The Vili diplomatic contingent sealed themselves in their shuttle and broadcast warnings across 17 star systems. This is Ambassador Crix of the Vili Collective. The message repeated on every frequency. Human offspring have infiltrated Nexus Station. Theta 7 and all civilized species are advised to avoid this location until the threat has been contained. In the water-filled corridors of the aquatic section, the minnow schools swam in frantic spirals as they debated what to do. "Flee," said the elders. "Where?" asked the young ones. Nobody had an answer that made sense. Meanwhile, in the converted cargo hold of the Gentle Current, the 17 children of New Bezine began another day of waiting. Ji-hoon woke first, as he always did, and carefully checked on each child before allowing himself to eat breakfast. Baby Sumin needed her morning feeding, and the twins, Minjun and Minseo, were arguing over whose turn it was to use the tablet for games. Hannah sat by herself in a corner, drawing pictures with the last of her colored pencils. "What are you drawing?" Ji-hoon asked, crouching beside her. "Our house on New Bizin," Hannah answered without looking up, "so I do not forget what it looked like." Ji-hoon swallowed the lump in his throat and put his hand gently on her shoulder. "That is a good idea," he said. "Maybe you can teach the little ones to draw their houses too." Captain Yuna Park watched the children from the doorway, her heart aching with a pain she could not express 3 weeks ago. She had been a simple freighter captain hauling supplies between colonies. Now she was responsible for 17 orphans who had watched their world burn. "Captain," Dae-young called from the cockpit. "You need to see this." Yuna joined her first mate at the communications console, where a live feed showed the station's departure bays. Ships were leaving in waves, their engines flaring bright against the darkness of space. 18,000 gone already, Dae-young reported grimly. "And more leaving every hour. Because of the children?" "Because of fear," Dae-young corrected. "These species have never encountered human young before, and everything they think they know about us comes from reports written by researchers who observed us from a distance." Yuna watched another ship vanish into faster-than-light travel. "We need 72 hours for repairs," she said. "Can we survive here that long?" "I do not know." In the administrative offices high above the main concourse, Administrator Vexel faced the remaining members of the station council through a view screen. Most seats at the virtual table sat empty, their occupants having fled with their species. But those who remained were demanding answers. "This is unacceptable," growled Merchant Prince Torvax, a Felrith who had stayed behind to protect his family's business interests. "Human offspring are the most dangerous form of predator young in known space, and you have allowed them to dock at our station." "I allowed a damaged ship to dock for emergency repairs," Vexel responded calmly. The presence of children was not disclosed until after docking procedures were complete. "Then expel them," demanded Ambassador Nihilith, a Vili who had missed the evacuation shuttle. "Send them back into space before they cause more damage." "What damage have they caused?" asked a quiet voice. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. A hollow-named presence who represented the empathic collective on the council. 18,000 residents have fled. Ambassador Nihilith sputtered. "Economic losses are already in the billions, and our reputation as a safe trading hub is destroyed. That damage was caused by fear." Presence replied, their translucent form shimmering with colors that indicated deep thought. "Fear of children who have done nothing but sleep in a cargo hold and sing songs to comfort each other. You cannot know what they will do. Torvax argued. I know what they feel, Presence countered. Grief beyond measure. Terror that has become constant, and underneath it all, a desperate hope that somewhere in this vast universe, someone will help them. The council fell silent. Security Chief Torval, who had been listening from the back of the room, stepped forward. I have reviewed 17 different interstellar humanitarian codes, he announced, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. Forcing traumatized refugee children back onto a damaged vessel would violate every single one, and this station could face sanctions from the Galactic Council itself. The Galactic Council is far away, Ambassador Nihilith muttered. Their laws are not. Torval replied. Administrator Vexel raised his hand for silence. The humans will remain until their ship is repaired, he declared. This decision is final. As the council session ended, Vexel walked to his window and looked down at the station below. Half the shops stood empty, and half the residential sections had gone dark. But in the remaining occupied areas, lights still burned, and beings still moved through their daily routines. These were the ones who had chosen to stay. In the maintenance quarters beneath the main concourse, Gren workers continued their endless tasks of keeping the station alive. Could have left, grumbled Old Ketch as he repaired a broken ventilation unit. Had a cousin with a ship heading toward the core worlds. Why did you stay? Asked young Bricks, his apprentice. Ketch thought about the question for a long moment. Someone has to keep the air flowing, he finally answered. Does not matter who else is breathing it. In the medical research wing, Quillix the Morith scientist prepared her observation equipment. She had studied hundreds of species across her long career, but she had never had the opportunity to observe human young in person. Everything she knew came from second-hand reports and theoretical models. The galactic community believes human children are uniquely dangerous, she dictated into her recorder. They describe them as predators in training, learning to hunt and kill before they reach maturity. But I have accessed the security feeds from the cargo hold, and what I observe contradicts everything in the literature. She paused the recording and watched the feed more closely. The oldest human child was teaching the younger ones a clapping game, their hands moving in patterns while they sang. They display cooperative behavior, Quillix continued. They comfort each other when distressed. They share resources without conflict, and they defer to the oldest child as a leader. And these are not the behaviors of predators. She saved the recording and began preparing a formal research proposal. If she could study these children properly, she might overturn decades of misinformation about human development. As the station's evening cycle approached again, the remaining 19,000 residents settled into an uneasy routine. They went about their business, but their eyes kept drifting toward view screens that showed the docking bay where the human ship sat quietly. They listened for alarms that never came and watched for violence that never appeared. And in the cargo hold of the gentle current, Ji-hoon tucked the younger children into their beds and told them stories about heroes who never gave up. Even when the whole universe seemed to be against them. Will anyone help us? Little Su Yeon asked. Clutching her blanket, Ji-hoon looked at the cargo bay doors, beyond which 19,000 beings struggled with their fear. I do not know, he admitted. But I have to believe that somewhere out there, someone is brave enough to try. He did not know that in the darkness of space, ships were gathering, and not all of them came in peace. The battered freighter drifted toward Nexus Station. Theta 7 like a wounded animal, seeking shelter from a storm. Captain Yuna Park gripped the controls with tired hands as warning lights flashed across her console, and the ship groaned with every small movement. Docking Bay 12, the station controller announced through crackling speakers. You are cleared for emergency landing, and repairs will take approximately 72 hours. Yuna let out a breath she had been holding for 3 weeks and turned to her first mate, a stocky man named Dae Young, who had served with her for 7 years. "We made it," she whispered, behind her, through the reinforced door that led to the cargo hold. She could hear the soft sounds of children singing a lullaby in Korean Nexus Station Theta 7 hung in orbit around the massive gas giant, its rings of purple and gold casting strange light. Through every viewport, the station housed approximately 40,000 residents from over 60 different species and served as one of the busiest trading hubs in this sector of the galaxy. Administrator Vexil watched the human ship dock from his office high above the main concourse. He was a Morth, a species known for careful planning and cautious decision-making, and his 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the vessel on his screen. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 80 years ago. They came from a planet the other species called a death world, a place of extreme temperatures, dangerous predators, and violent weather patterns. The fact that any intelligent life had evolved there had always considered something of a miracle. Or perhaps a warning. Vezil tapped his communicator and connected to the docking bay. "Standard inspection," he ordered. "Nothing unusual, just follow protocol." Down in docking bay 12, a team of inspectors from 3 different species approached the gentle current as its ramp lowered with a hiss of escaping pressure. Captain Park descended first, her boots heavy on the metal deck and her eyes scanning the inspection team with the alertness of someone who had not slept properly in weeks. "Welcome to Nexus Station Theta 7, the lead inspector said, a Felrath with golden fur and nervous whiskers. "We will need to examine your cargo manifest and inspect your hold." "Of course," Yuna replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "But I need to explain something first." The Felrath inspector tilted his head, his ears flattening slightly. "Explain what, Captain?" Yuna gestured for her crew to open the main cargo doors as the heavy panels slid apart. The inspectors froze at what they saw inside. The cargo hold had been converted into a living space. Blankets and pillows covered the floor in organized clusters, and small personal items hung from the walls in makeshift pouches, and there, sitting in groups or lying asleep on their beds, were 17 human children. The youngest was an infant, barely 8 months old, cradled in the arms of a 12-year-old boy. The oldest children watched the inspectors with wary eyes, while the younger ones hid behind their protectors. "These are survivors from the colony of New Bazang," Captain Park explained, her voice cracking slightly. "Pirates attacked 3 weeks ago, and we were the only ship that escaped." The Felrath inspector stumbled backward, his fur standing on end. "Predator offspring," he gasped. "You brought predator offspring onto this station." Within 2 hours, word had spread through every communication network on Nexus Station Theta 7. The news traveled through market stalls and residential quarters, through medical bays and entertainment districts, through whispered conversations and panicked broadcasts. Human children were aboard the station, predator cubs from a death world. The Felrath merchants were the first to flee. They abandoned their shops without even locking the doors, leaving behind merchandise worth millions of credits in their desperation to reach their ships. The Vili sealed their entire habitat section and sent emergency broadcasts to their homeworld, warning of predator offspring loose on a civilian station. The Skrull wrapped themselves in their protective shells and refused to emerge. The minnow school swam in frantic circles in their water-filled corridors, unable to decide whether to stay or go in the station commons. Beings who had lived as neighbors for years suddenly looked at each other with suspicion. Wondering who would stay and who would run, Administrator Vexil stood at his office window, watching the chaos unfold below as departure requests flooded his communication systems. His assistant, a young Morth named Tilax, rushed in with a data tablet clutched in trembling hands. "Sir," We have received over 18,000 emergency departure requests in the past 2 hours, Tilax reported. The departure bays are overwhelmed, and 3 ships have already collided trying to leave without proper clearance. Vexil closed his eyes and tried to think he had read the reports about humans. The same reports every administrator in the galaxy had. Studied humans were apex predators who had clawed their way to dominance on one of the most hostile planets ever discovered. They could run for hours without stopping, could survive injuries that would kill most species, could adapt to almost any environment, and possessed an endurance that bordered on terrifying, and their young, the reports suggested, were even more dangerous, unpredictable, energetic, still learning to control their predatory instincts. Sir, Tilax interrupted his thoughts. The Station Council is demanding an emergency meeting, and several species are threatening economic sanctions if the humans are not expelled immediately. Vexil turned to face his assistant. And the humans themselves? What are they doing? Tilax checked his tablet with shaking fingers. The children remain in the cargo hold of their ship, sir, and Captain Park has requested food supplies, medical attention for several of the younger ones, and patience while her ship is repaired. They're not rampaging through the station? No, sir. They're not hunting other species? No, sir. They appear to be singing songs and playing games with small toys. Vexil stared at his assistant for a long moment. Interesting, he said finally, by the time the station entered its evening cycle. The population of Nexus Station Theta 7 had dropped from 40,000 to just over 19,000. The departure bays fell quiet as the last fleeing ships vanished into the darkness of space. Those who remained did so for different reasons. The Hollow, a species of empathic beings who experience the emotions of others as their own, refused to leave because they could feel the grief and fear radiating from the cargo hold of the gentle current. We cannot abandon such suffering, their speaker announced. It would be like abandoning ourselves. The Grand Maintenance workers stayed because someone had to keep the station running, and they took their responsibilities seriously, regardless of personal fear. A Morath medical researcher named Quillix stayed out of scientific curiosity, fascinated by the opportunity to study human development up close. Security Chief Dorval, a gruff Dendari with 20 years of service on the station, stayed because forcing traumatized children back onto a damaged ship would violate 17 different interstellar humanitarian codes, and Administrator Vexil stayed because it was his station and he would not abandon it to fear. As the lights dimmed for the evening cycle, the remaining residents gathered in small groups throughout the station, watching the docking bay on view screens, waiting to see what the predator cubs would do next in the cargo hold of the gentle current. 12-year-old Jihoon held baby Su Min against his chest and hummed a lullaby his mother used to sing around him. The other children slept in exhausted clusters, their faces peaceful despite everything they had lost. What happens now? Asked 8-year-old Hana, who could not sleep. Jihoon looked at the cargo bay doors, beyond which an entire station waited in fear of children who only wanted to be safe. I do not know, he admitted. But we have survived this long, and we will survive whatever comes next. Outside, 19,000 beings held their breath and wondered the same thing.